Mr. President, earlier this month, President Trump announced that he was firing the Attorney General, Pam Bondi. I would say it's no surprise. She has been politically controversial. She has done things in a little over a year that she served that are unprecedented. She transformed the department from the nation's preeminent law enforcement agency into a political entity. And apparently that she didn't go far enough to please the president, and he fired her. At the core of this MAGA makeover at DOJ was a systematic purge of career professionals. I've met with them, men and women working for the Department of Justice with years of experience prosecuting cases, going after criminals and terrorists and the like. Hundreds of these experienced prosecutors were forced out, stripping the department of decades of institutional knowledge and experience. The acting Attorney General now, since Bondi was fired, is named Todd Blanche. He recently said that there remain no more employees in the Department of Justice and FBI that worked on the criminal investigations of President Trump. They've all been fired, forced out. The impact of the last year can't be overstated. The department recently said in its National Security Division is facing unprecedented personnel constraints at a time when our country is embroiled in a significant international conflict in Iran. At the same time, the department, under former Attorney General Bondi, was quick to welcome individuals who were involved in violent efforts to overturn the 2020 election. I mentioned earlier that I've been in the Senate for 30 years. There are moments I will never forget, and one of those was January 6th. That was the time when we were counting the ballots, 2021 rather, and those ballots were being counted by the Vice President of the United States, Vice President Pence. He was sitting where the presiding officer is now. I was sitting in this desk. It was 2 in the afternoon. We were counting the Electoral College ballots brought in from around the country. It is a rather routine process, hardly ever controversial, but in this one, something happened we'll never forget. I watched as the Secret Service came up and literally dragged Vice President Pence out of that chair and through that door outside the Senate chamber. The rest of us senators were sitting here, we're looking at one another, what's going on? We knew there were demonstrators outside, we could hear them. We knew there were a lot of them. They'd gone to a rally with the president a few blocks away from the Capitol, and now they had marched on the Capitol. So at that point, a member of the Capitol Police, a wonderful group of law enforcement agents who protect all of the visitors to the gallery as well as the senators and staff, one of the members of the police in uniform stood before us and said, "Don't worry, this is a safe place to be. Stay right where you are. Other people will come in and join you, and we'll let you know what's going to happen next." We said, okay. 10 minutes later, the same individual came before us and said, "Forget what I told you earlier. In an orderly fashion, leave the chamber as fast as possible. The demonstrators are right outside the door." So we all went through that door, ushered downstairs and outside, along with Vice President Pence. It was a terrible scene. We had 150 law enforcement agents with the Capitol Police who were protecting the visitors to the Capitol as well as senators, congressmen, and their staffs. And many of those people were hurt, physically hurt. As a result of that, the Department of Justice under President Biden investigated and had over 1,500 of them who were arrested and prosecuted, and many of them were serving time in jail for what they did on that day. You've seen the videotapes. I'm not going to describe them. Draw your own conclusions. But I can tell you inside, I've never quite seen the Senate in that situation that it was that day. What happened when President Trump was elected to his second term? The day he was sworn in, he signed a full and unconditional pardon for all of the 1,500 who had been arrested for descending on the Capitol on January 6th. Regardless of whether or not they'd been found guilty of a felony for hurting law enforcement agents, regardless of that, he gave them full and unconditional pardons. The impact of that was significant. More than 1,500 people charged and convicted of offenses related to January 6th were subject to the president's blanket pardon. Department of Justice hired a pardoned insurrectionist named Jared Weiss. This man who, on January 6th, was berating officers and calling them Nazis and Gestapo, repeatedly urged the violent mob to, quote, kill him, close quote. This is on videotape, as Capitol Police officers were being attacked. Thankfully, he left the department the same day Attorney General Bondi was fired. An individual who descended on the Capitol urged people to harm the law enforcement agents trying to keep it peaceful, was then prosecuted, then subject to a pardon, then hired by the Department of Justice to serve as a senior advisor. He's gone, thank goodness. While the department's leadership prioritized installing Trump cronies and forcing out experienced attorneys, they quietly closed more than 23,000 criminal investigations in the first 6 months of the Trump administration. To prioritize Trump's unpopular and cruel mass deportation campaign, the department declined to pursue prosecutions in hundreds of terrorism, drug, and white-collar criminal investigations. The National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team was dedicated to investigating crypto-related fraud and money laundering. It was disbanded under the former Attorney General. All this took place while the President pardoned his wealthy allies who had defrauded Americans out of millions of dollars, founded notorious dark web drug markets, and supported President Trump's family businesses. This drastic shift away from the department's core public safety mission highlights indifference to the rights and safety of Americans. I tell you this story because we now have a vacancy in the Attorney General's position. Todd Blanche is there on a temporary basis, and we have to decide whether to fill the ranks. I think Americans can agree on the basics. We want a Department of Justice which is not run for political purposes, but to keep us safe in America, safe in our homes, safe in our neighborhoods, safe in our nation. That is the bottom line. Getting even with people who are fair or unfair to the current president is not the mission of the Department of Justice. It is the administration of justice in a non-political way. I certainly hope that in the weeks and months ahead, while we debate this issue, that we can go back to a Department of Justice that we can trust as an apolitical agency doing its best to bring safety and peace to America. Mr. President, I yield the floor.